Hey there, I'm going to show you how I save about $150 a year just by changing how I buy, or rather how my wife Emily buys our spices. And here's the crazy part. This isn't just for taco seasoning, this same trick works for all different kinds of popular spice blends. Stick around and I'll show you the breakdown. Here's the deal. Emily loves buying her spices from Penzeys, but these small jars can add up quickly. For example, for our go-to Mexican taco seasoning, it can cost $21.17 for each 1-cup batch when we use these small jars. Don't get me wrong, I love Penzeys and what they have to offer. But recently I saw a credit card charge from them and I was a little bit blown away about how much we're spending with them. I started thinking about all the different spices we use, and in particular some of these high volume spice blends that we use each and every single week. For us, it's really this Mexican taco seasoning blend that we use in a lot of different dishes. So again, I'm not here to bash Penzeys, and we're going to continue to buy from them, particularly some of their more unique spices and blends. So what's your go-to spice blend that you use all the time? Drop it in the comments. So I did the math, and what I found out is that if I buy these larger containers from Amazon, as opposed to these smaller spice containers, my 1-cup batch cost for taco Mexican seasoning goes from $21.17 all the way down to $2.31 per batch. As I mentioned in the intro, this isn't only for taco Mexican seasoning. I also took a look at 5 different popular spice blends to see how much you could save with those as well. So what I did is I compared the cost of buying smaller containers from the grocery store and Penzeys against the cost of buying larger containers from Amazon. And I also took a look at some organic options as well. I do want to point out that Penzeys also has larger size containers of spices that they sell. You don't just have to buy these little tiny ones. They have medium sized ones, and they even sell some larger sizes in bags as well. So if Penzeys is your thing, you can also save money by sticking with them, just buying in more of their larger size containers. For example, for this taco Mexican seasoning, I priced it out for us what it would be if we switched over to their larger size containers. And the batch price could go from about $22 down to about $10 per batch. As I mentioned, I also checked out some organic options, and this one surprised me a little. I found that if you're buying the smaller jars of organic spices from the grocery store, for example, with this taco Mexican seasoning, you can go from about $9 a batch to about $3 a batch if you're buying these larger organic spices from Amazon, and that's for a 1-cup batch. And not too surprisingly, the least amount of cost savings is if you're buying the small jars of regular spices from the grocery store versus buying bulk regular spices from Amazon. You're really only going to save about $3 per batch there, but that still adds up over time. Okay, now I'm going to get a little deeper into the numbers and show you how much you could save across different spice blends. From the chart on the screen, you can see that the savings varies depending on the particular spice blend, and it can really be impacted if one of the items in the spice blend is a specialty spice. For example, the poultry spice blend can be much more expensive if you're purchasing those small jars from the grocery store versus Amazon. That's really because it contains marjoram. And I noticed at the time when I was pricing that a small jar of marjoram was just really expensive at the grocery store as opposed to getting it a little bit more bulk size from Amazon. So the bottom line is, in every spice blend scenario that I looked at, I found that you could save money by buying in bulk, whether it's from Amazon or from somewhere else. Okay, so now I'm going to dive into my particular scenario with this taco Mexican seasoning blend. So I use about 8 cups of this seasoning per year. So what I'm seeing is if I'm making this spice blend with those small jars from Penzeys, just looking at the numbers here, it's like $21.17 per batch times those 8 batches, that's 1 cup each. It comes out to $169.36. And then if I buy it from Amazon in bulk, you know, these types of containers here, it comes out to $2.31 a batch times those 8 batches, and it comes out to just $18.48. So that's a savings of about $150 each and every single year, and that's just for one spice blend. I did want to mention one last thing around the upfront costs. If you're making that Mexican blend and buying the small jars from Penzeys, your upfront cost is really only going to be about $48. But when you switch over to the bulk scenario, it's going to cost you about $72 to get each spice you need to make that first batch. But the difference is that you're only going to be able to make about 1 or 2 batches with the small jars versus about 15 batches with the bulk containers before you need to rebuy any of that stuff. So in the long run, it's going to be a good savings for you. Now you might be wondering, why don't all these bulk spices just go stale? It's a great question. Let's talk storage. For many of you, space is going to be a concern. Obviously, these larger containers are going to take up more space in your pantry or in your cupboard. And if you need to go out and rent a storage unit to be able to store this stuff, it may not be worth it for you. So you got to keep space in mind. Another thing to keep in mind is that spices don't necessarily go bad if they're stored properly, but the flavor can drop off over time if they're exposed to oxygen. So you got to keep that in mind as well. The shelf life of spices really varies depending on what form it's in. Whole spices can retain their flavor the longest because those essential oils are locked in until you grind them up. For ground spices, they can lose their potency faster because there's a larger surface area that's exposed to oxygen. Then for leaves and delicate herbs, they'll lose their flavor even a little bit quicker than those ground seeds. And then for those spice blends like we've been talking about, they sort of follow the weakest link rule where whatever spice loses its flavor quickest in that blend is kind of the same shelf life you're going to want to have for that particular blend. I do want to emphasize that these timelines aren't about quality or safety. Spices don't go bad in a way that are going to make you feel sick, but they lose that aroma and flavor over time. I also want to go over some best practice for storing spices. The number one thing is to try and keep them away from heat and light. So you're going to want to store them in a cupboard or in a drawer or maybe in your pantry. But you want to try and avoid having them maybe near your oven where they can absorb heat, or in a window where they're going to get sunlight, which is going to speed up that flavor loss. A second good practice is to use airtight containers. So you're going to want to use glass jars or high quality plastic containers that have some sort of a seal to prevent air and humidity from getting in. Another little tip is to try to avoid shaking the container above like a steaming pot, because that will allow the steam to get into your spice jar and it can clump the spices, and then that moisture in there will also just speed up the flavor loss. Another thing you're going to want to do is label your spices with either the purchase date or the date you put that blend together. I like to just use some painter's tape and a Sharpie. You don't need to get fancy with it, and that seems to work great for me. And finally, if you're buying in large quantities, you need to have a bulk strategy, which means that you have to have a nice cool place, dry place to store these bulk spices, and plan to kind of refill your smaller spice containers for daily use rather than constantly opening up the larger container and exposing that to oxygen. That'll help those make sure that they retain their flavor as long as possible. So if you're looking for a quick test for freshness, all you got to do is take a little pinch between your fingers and rub it and give it a smell or give it a taste. And if that aroma or the flavor is weak, that means that spice is past its prime, and you probably should start with a new blend. So as I mentioned, you want to store your spices in airtight containers. That can be just refilling those glass jars you got at the grocery store, or you can use a mason jar. These are great because you can get a nice tight seal on them. For my taco Mexican seasoning blend, I've been using this plastic container that I got from Amazon. It has a rubber seal on it, and you can fill it up with around a cup or a cup and a half or so. And the cool thing is it's kind of got this slider so that you can sprinkle it out, or you can slide it back and put a spoon in there and measure out a specific amount. And then you can close it up with a click and make sure you got it closed. So if you're interested in that, I'll put a link in the description. So here's the bottom line. If you're using a spice blend where you're really going through a lot of it, something like our taco seasoning, or maybe it's a barbecue rub or Cajun seasoning, stop buying the tiny jars. Buy in bulk, mix your own, and the savings are going to add up. So if you're going to be making the switch to bulk, be sure to check the links in the description where I provide my recommendations for the exact bulk spices that I use to make my blends. I do want to mention that this is not a sponsored video, but if you do want to support the channel, we make a small commission if you purchase something through the Amazon links in the description. But don't worry, this is no extra cost for you. And if you would like to see more nerdy, how can I save money cooking videos like this one, please let me know in the comments. And finally, thanks for watching this episode of Built to Taste. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this episode with someone that likes tacos as much as you do.